we go. Hello and welcome to the regular business meeting for the District of Squamish. Today is Tuesday, February 20th, 2024. As always, we're gathered to do our work today on the traditional and unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. Can I have someone move adoption of the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Greenlaw. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Our first order of business is the Lions Club and their donation to the Splash Park. And they've brought a oversized check, which is amazing. Do we have someone to? Is there a presentation that goes with, or are we going to recess for a photo op? Is it purely to the photo op? You'll present. Okay, maybe you'll have you approach the mic and say a few words and present the check, and then we'll recess and we can do some photos together. Perfect. Unless there's no one that wishes to speak to it, in which case we can the check can speak for itself if you prefer.
So in discussion, we wanted to figure something out to do. And I brought up the idea of donating or creating an accessible playground. And then I heard that the District of Squamish was doing one. And then I found out it was an accessible water park and playground. And I was super excited. And I brought it up to the Lions at one of our meetings. And so we have decided to give $10,000 to the District of Squamish to go towards the accessible water park / playground to help out with the cost of that.
Well, thank you so much for all your work in the community and for your generous donation. I think, do we have any, Council, have any questions? What I thought we would do is we do a quick recess and we'll do some photos together with the check. Councillor French?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I wonder if you could just give us a little insight into how the money was raised. Was there a specific initiative, or is this from like your general fundraising?
We asked the Woodfibre LNG to help contribute some of the money, and that was our sole purpose of asking them for some money to go towards an accessible playground. So they gave half, and then as a Lions Club, we do fundraising all year round for people in need in the community. And we had some excess funds, so we decided to match Woodfibre LNG's donation of $5,000.
Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
We aren't allowed to applaud in council chambers, so you gave your presentation. I wanted to applaud, but we're not technically allowed to. So I just want to say thank you. It's something that we talk about often in terms of trying to achieve the huge list of goals that we have as a community and as a district, and how we do it. And we do it through partnership, and we do it with the support of community organizations like the Lions Club to be able to show up and do the important fundraising to get us across the line. So I just want to say thanks from myself, and I'm sure my council colleagues, for the work and for thinking of the importance of the accessibility aspects of the infrastructure that we're building for the future of our community. So thanks for the work.
So there are some playgrounds that he has never been able to play on. So when I heard about this and we all started talking about what we wanted to do for something for the community, this was something big, not only on me, but everybody in the Lions Club. So.
Well, thank you so much for bringing, for recognizing the need and participating in the solution, as it were. So thank you so much. I think, Council, what we'll do now is we'll take a quick, maybe 5-minute recess. We'll do some photos together, and then we'll move on with the rest of our agenda. So we'll recess, and we'll be back at 10 after. Okay, welcome back. Now we're on to item 4 on our agenda, consideration of unscheduled public attendance. If there's a member of the public that has a matter that they would like to have council address before the next regular council meeting, this would be your opportunity. Seeing none, move on. We have no public hearings, no scheduled items today, so we're on to the consent agenda. Council, did anyone want to pull anything from the consent agenda? Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, 7B 1 through 7, but just as a single group.
Okay, just the entirety of the correspondence. Okay, no problem. We'll deal with that at the appropriate spot. With those items removed, could I have someone move the consent agenda, please? Moved by Councillor Greenlaw, second by Councillor Anderson. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Now we're on to consideration of council committee recommendations. So the first one there is, I guess that's all related to short-term rentals. We can do these together. Is that correct? Is that correct? We
Yes.
can do these all. Okay, so these are all together. Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, I had a question for staff, if that's possible.
We can try on whether we have the appropriate staff to address your question or not, but go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I was having some second thoughts about the timing of this resolution in relation to some other work we're doing. And so I see this is only to initiate the bylaws. We'd still have to go and approve it, but I'm wondering if it's better to, and basically I have some concerns depending on the outcomes of some of our TUP discussions about how we move on this. So I'm wondering if it's better to defer this or just let this move forward and then sort of consider the bylaw at the time when the TUP decisions are known.
I'm not sure if that's a procedural question. The piece here is to initiate these bylaws, and I think we have control of adoption, and that's the timing of adoption once they're completed the work. So I don't know that that's a decision for today. If you'd like to talk to that, speak to that, Ms. Glende.
Thank you through the mayor. In terms of that question, agree that this is initiating the work, the adoption of the bylaws when they come back forward, back to council for readings on the bylaws is a different timing. And in the interim, I can confer with staff on if there's any sort of validity in timing them against the work camp TUP is what you're referring to. And either way, we can let you know and time it accordingly.
Okay. So would you like to move? Can I put you on the spot to move those? Okay, so thank you. Councillor Pettingill moves. Is there a seconder for the recommendations? These are just the recommendations from Committee of the Whole last week. Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Any discussion on these? Go ahead, Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, just to add a bit of clarity to my question or concern, it's just that in general, I'm quite supportive of the things we talked about and the direction that the recommendation we accepted. But in contemplating possible outcomes of the TUP discussions, I am worried that some of these penalties in that particular context for the next few years may actually get us an outcome we don't want. And so depending on what we decide with the TUPs and how all that falls out, I may not want to move forward with some of these things at this point in time. And so that was my sort of hesitation. And so I guess we will cross that bridge when the bylaws come back to us.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm going to speak in favor of these motions. I think it's important that staff initiate the work to start on these bylaw changes. I hope that at the Committee of the Whole meeting, we gave some feedback regarding some more detailed feedback, more detailed than these motions represent. And I just wanted to reiterate here, while I agree with district staff, with staff initiating the municipal ticket enforcement bylaw amendment, amending the fine from $500 to $3,000 dollars per infraction per day. I hope they can do so in the context of looking at the other fines and making sure things are proportional within our municipal fining, within our municipal bylaws. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Unfortunately, I wasn't part of this discussion last week at Committee of the Whole, as I was at the UBCM Housing Summit, of which part of the discussion was the implementation and implications of the provincial changes on short-term rentals. I have gone back and listened to the discussion around the table. I will support the motions on the floor because I think they help to bring us in line with some of the provincial legislation, but I still think that there are a lot of questions around the implications and long-term impacts and how best we can utilize the resources that are coming from the province in terms of a provincial enforcement unit. So I still have lots of questions, but I think this work is the first step of potentially many to make sure we have a streamlined process going forward.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And now we're on to item 9, bylaws. So 9A, consideration of second reading. And I will turn the floor over to our staff to introduce themselves and the topic.
Ready. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Philip Gibbons, planner with the Community Planning Department, and I also have Devin Kianaga, manager of Development Engineering, on the line, who will be available for answering any questions related to traffic impacts. To recap, for this proposal, it's 40480 Tantalus Road. This project's located in the Garibaldi Estates neighbourhood, north of Tantalus Fire Hall, east of Highway 99. And to the north is agricultural and single and multi-family residential uses. To the south is the fire hall, and to the east is currently undeveloped land, and it is adjacent to the highway and the district corridor trail. This project has not changed since first reading. It includes 2 phases with 3 mixed-use buildings. Phase 1 being west of Tantalus Road. Phase 2, buildings 2 and 3 east of Tantalus Road. And it will include, the buildings will include market rental, affordable and for sale market housing options, commercial and childcare spaces at the ground level, park and nature spaces, and also pedestrian and active transportation connections. Building 1 is a 6-story building with 5 stories of market rental units and 1 story of commercial space, with a breezeway down the middle and a partially sunken parkade. Residential use in this building will be restricted to rental tenure only, and the zoning will permit a wide range of commercial uses. Building 2 is similar to Building 1, except the residential component will be for sale market residential units. And commercial areas will receive the same uses and restrictions as Building 1. And finally, Building 3 will be a 6-story and will have for sale market residential units and a 465 square metre childcare space comprising part of the ground floor and an associated external childcare space. It also includes a partially sunken parquet, which is shared with Building 2, and this building will allow for residential and childcare uses only. The project also includes a new park adjacent to the highway, which will be handed over to the district, and protection of the environmentally sensitive areas to the east of the 3 buildings will be also handed over. Again, the zoning proposed for this amendment is a new CD 98 zone, which will provide for the 3 proposed building and associated uses as described previously. In addition to the residential apartment use, commercial uses include artisan, arts and culture, assisted living, assembly, business service establishment, civic, fitness center, high technology, indoor recreation, institutional use, liquor store, neighborhood commercial, research and development, small scale manufacturing and tourist bureau. And the P3 Park Recreational Institution Zone will be applied to the proposed district park to the west. And P4 Ecological Reserve is proposed to be applied to the environmentally sensitive lands to the east. The current CAC proposal is shown on this slide. Since the proposal was last presented at first reading, the CAC policy has been updated. A comparison between the existing proposal and the current CAC policy was provided in the report to Council. And the current CAC proposal meets or exceeds the requirements of the new CAC policy. For phase 1, which is the market rental building, it's proposed to wrap all of the proposed CAC contribution into the park, which is to be developed and handed over to the district. And improvements will be to the value of $453,000, and this will be bonded prior to adoption of the bylaw. For phase 2, which is the for sale units in buildings 2 and 3, it's proposed to have 6% of gross floor area to be donated to the Housing Society, a cash in lieu amount of $1,002,000, and a 465 square metre childcare space. And for this phase, the proposed public art and potential trail to Coho Park will draw down from the cash in lieu. The cash in lieu will be payable prior to development permit issuance, and inflation will be applied after adoption, and renegotiation of the CSE will be required if development not commenced within 5 years. The additional benefits of this project include the phase 1 market rental building, which will yield approximately 100 units, no gas covenant for the whole development secured in the land development agreement. 20% of the units will be 3-bedroom across the development, and this will be applied across the different tenures proposed and secured in the land development agreement. And the environmentally sensitive eastern portion of the lands proposed to be zoned for environmental protection and handed over to the district, and there'll be new pedestrian active transport connections. This proposal meets OCP policy by aligning with land use designations, providing infill of vacant underutilized land with compact high density development, providing additional commercial space serving community mixed-use commercial areas, providing market rental units close to core transit, shops and services. It also advances 4 strategic plan objectives. These are diversity of housing forms and tenure types, provision of parks, trails and gathering spaces, equity and provision of active transportation networks, and provision of employment spaces. Issues raised by Council at first reading have been summarised and addressed within the report to Council and listed here on this slide. The first 4 items are related to the community amenity contributions. That is the Greenfield CAC component, active transportation parks CAC component, childcare provision, and the sunset clause for land development agreement. And these have all been addressed through the implementation of the new CAC policy since first reading, or through changes to the CAC proposal itself. And as I mentioned before, the current proposal meets or exceeds the current CAC policy. Clarification have been provided in the report for the next 2 items, which are related to the number of 3-bedroom units and the location of the proposed trails. The requirement for and location of the trails and also the number of 3-bedroom units will be generally secured within the land development agreement. Regarding employment space provision, Council had concerns about the amount of employment space proposed was insufficient and that commercial users proposed to not promote creation of higher paying jobs. Staff continued to support the current proposal as it relates to employment space given current market constraints, and the traffic impacts will be discussed on a future slide. A public information meeting was held by the applicant on April 19th, 2023, and additional consultation was undertaken with the adjacent funeral home and with the Housing Society. Issues raised and support for the project were summarised as part of the first reading report. No additional consultation has been undertaken to date, and a public hearing will be required prior to 3rd reading, as this project is not exempt under the new provincial housing legislation. The traffic study. The applicant's consultant updated the traffic impact study based on feedback from the district and the Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure. The latest revision indicates that the Garibaldi Way, Tantalus Road, and Highway 99 and Garibaldi Way intersections are sensitive to growth in the area. The report also indicates that this development exacerbates forecast issues. Solutions to the identified issues are significant in nature and include changes to the Highway 99 and Garibaldi Way intersection, lane configurations, the signalisation of the Garibaldi Tantalus intersection, and longer term upgrades to other nearby accesses to the highway. Even with these solutions identified, there will be significant delays at some of the highway turning movements, and the shopping plaza access will be significantly impacted. This development will need to contribute towards mitigating their impacts due to increased traffic from their development, and district staff are reviewing mitigation options, and the report will be available as part of the public hearing package.
I was going to stop you there. I had a hand. Councillor Stoner, is this the timing of your question, or can we come back to question after? Okay, thank you. Continue.
Next steps will be to finalise technical studies, including traffic impact assessment with approved terms of reference from MOTI and the water and sewer modelling. And then next will be, if given second reading, the public hearing will be scheduled for March 19th, 2024. And finally, recommendation is that District of Squamish Amendment Bylaw 2660 for 4040 Tantalus Road be given second reading, and that a public hearing for the aforementioned bylaw be scheduled for March 19th, 2024 at the District of Squamish. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you go back to the last slide, those two outstanding pieces that would be completed before third reading, are those in process, and it's reasonable that they would form part of the public hearing package? I'm just trying to understand when we'll surface these things and when the public can see them, as it might feed into the public hearing process.
Through the mayor, it was intended that we'll have the traffic impact assessment available as part of the public hearing package. The water and sewer modeling is a more technical aspect that would be prior to third reading.
Okay. Councillor Stoughton.
Thank you. Through the chair, appreciate the sneak peek on the preliminary results of the traffic impact assessment, but I don't think it's overly surprising. This is something that we've raised with this rezoning since it was first presented in its scale and scope. And council has continuously requested that the traffic impact assessment and the resulting solutions be brought forward prior to second reading. And so I'm curious why staff are here asking for second reading when we don't have a solution, but we have a glimpse that this is going to exacerbate problems on areas that we already know are challenging in our community.
Through the mayor, that is correct. We plan to bring the study at second reading. Unfortunately, there's a bigger traffic analysis going on for the area, so the timing of the study that's done by the proponents had to align with our work, and both the study the district is working on in the Garibaldi Estates and this study have to communicate with each other essentially. So drawing the conclusions of what has to be done is not as straightforward as we expected. So therefore staff, in order not to delay the project further, decided to bring it for council consideration, knowing that the results of the study will be presented in time for public hearing. But what we're gathering from the traffic study itself is, whether this rezoning goes ahead or not, there are going to be changes needed in the area, and those are probably going to have to be funded by the larger area.
I think one of the real challenges is we know that when we bring that level of new information forward at public hearing and we haven't had time to review and digest it, it makes it really difficult to have a public hearing based on the proposed scope of this rezoning. So I think that's the challenge that I have with it as presented, but that's a comment, not a question. So my other question was, I was under the impression that we were providing kind of in-stream protection for applications that were that were in-stream relative to the CAC policy updates. This seems like it's going the other way, where it was in-stream and now they are providing roughly $800,000 less than what was previously on the table. Can staff speak to why we haven't provided CAC protection or in-stream application protection for this one, but we have for others?
Through the mayor, before the new policy was adopted, we had discussions with the applicants about exempting certain portions of the development, like market rental, from the CACs, because even before we adopted a new policy, our own pro forma analysis was showing that this project, especially the market rental component, was not viable. So in that respect, the staff had suggested to the applicants that they can proceed on the basis that they'll be able to cherry pick in essence from both policies because the previous policy was not working for this development. And so this development and its CC offer partially informed where we landed with our policy because we had to run analysis on projects such as this and to see what works and what doesn't.
Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, a couple of things. Just it mentions phasing. Is that a sort of, and I apologize if you spoke to it already, but guaranteed or captured somewhere, and that phasing is a chronological phasing, and so the market rental will have occupancy before occupancy can be given on the non-market or on the market purchase?
Through the mayor, it's intended that the market rental portion will be included as phase one. The specifics of how that's detailed in the land development agreement haven't been.
Not-for-profit daycare, or it's just daycare full stop?
Through the mayor, just that it'll be daycare.
Okay, and then, sorry, two more if I can. The parkland piece, can staff just speak to why we would want to own it as opposed to just rezone it?
Through the mayor, so in the absence of a updated Parks and Rec master plan, this area is sort of similar in proximity to parks as Garibaldi Estates, where it's serviced within a 10-minute walking distance and not a 5-minute walking distance to nearby parks. Now, mind you, there will be hopefully a more direct link to Pat Good Park once this development goes in. But nevertheless, it seems like there's still an opportunity here to provide service, and it would be limited service such as playground and a community gardens in this location. So for long-term viability of that space as being maintained not by a rental property owner, but by the district, it seemed like a better outcome in the absence of a updated parks plan.
Okay, and then the last thing I read the notes about the ratio of commercial space, and I guess maybe this speaks to policy work we need to do, but in my head, I understand some developers are seeing some challenges with second level commercial or more commercial, but at the same time, I'm thinking, well, if we don't get a more substantial amount of commercial, where will the folks work? And then therefore, are we just building housing for workers in Vancouver or Whistler if we can't accomplish a building that has somehow in the community employment to match the housing we're building? I understand the need for housing, but in my mind, we need to find a way to have employment somewhere. And if it's not here, then where? And so I'm just wondering how we are thinking of that piece of it, sort of beyond just, is this viable in today's immediate market?
If you could, through the mayor, clarify the question.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to sort of wrap my head around. I understand there's some economic viability in terms of, say, 2 levels of commercial or more commercial. But if we just simply accept that, then isn't the outcome that we are building a whole bunch of housing without matching employment? And therefore, aren't we essentially building a bunch of housing for commuters, people who will be working in Whistler or Vancouver? Or do we actually have that employment here already? Or do we have a place where that employment is going to happen, where the people who are going to be, because this is all mostly market rental and purchase. So we need employment that matches, the incomes that can support those units. And so where is that employment going to be if not here?
Through the mayor, we've had discussions with the applicants of trying to add second story employment space. It's very challenging, and we've seen that in Squamish with second story office space. It's not as easily absorbed as we previously thought. And you can also, I'm sure we're all aware of the office space market in major centers in Canada. They're not doing very well. So it's harder to push for those things with applicants when we are reviewing development applications at the moment. This isn't one of our primary employment areas. Our primary employment areas are our business park. We have sections of downtown. The oceanfront development has primary employment areas as well. So I think it's a very good point that we need to also focus on provision of employment space. Is that I think the project financing gets tricky given the situation, the landscape, and the kind of uptick for second story employment space that we've seen in Squamish. Yeah.
Okay, I'll leave it there for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Mr. Robbins, I note the provision of a children's playground and community garden in the project. I'm interested in how we're looking after our youth, teens, young people. It is about just over 3/4 of a kilometer to the nearest playing fields at Mamquam Elementary from this development. Can or will the landscaping plan for the west side park adjacent to the highway accommodate a plot of grass large enough for youth to kick or throw a ball around? Can that be accommodated?
Through the mayor, the specifics of what will be included in the park are yet to be decided. There are several options on the table, and the landscaping plan was done for a cost estimation for basic landscaping in this initial phase, but the details are yet to be decided.
Thank you.
Councillor Stoner, you have something on this point?
Yeah, previous drawings also suggested a skate park. Is that still one of the options that's on the table, or has that been removed as an amenity?
Through the mayor, all the options are still on the table.
Thank you. Council, further questions? Go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks. So through the mayor, on staff's recommendation of a second reading, in this case, my understanding is the primary reservations for requesting a third reading are the traffic impact assessment. And what would be the what's the impact if we delay a third reading or a public hearing until we've seen the traffic impact assessment? I'm sharing Councillor Stoner's reservation of having a traffic impact assessment and a public hearing happening both at the same time and not having sufficient time to digest what the traffic impact assessment is saying.
Through the mayor, you could, I guess you could send it back. We could come a second reading at a further date where the traffic impact assessment is available for review, and then schedule a public hearing after that date.
So I share that concern, and the concern isn't that that there's not a suitable plan to be developed to handle the traffic. My concern is that we have, there's a lot to discuss with this, and with that piece floating there, I think a public hearing could be extremely problematic with that just being introduced at at that point. So I, seeing no other, go ahead, Councillor Storm.
I have a motion if council's ready to entertain something.
I was going to take a swing at my own is where I was going, so I'll start there and we'll see if we're on the same wavelength. I was going to refer this back to staff until such time as the traffic study and its subsequent recommendations can be incorporated into the request for second reading. You seconding that? Thank you.
This is ridiculous. This is going way too.
Sorry, sir, we don't.
Yeah, I'm gone. This is going way too far. We've had traffic studies, we've had comments, and I'm tired of this.
I think, so I'll speak to the motion briefly. I think there's work to be done and there's going to be output of the traffic studies, and we need to be able to clearly communicate to the public what those are in advance of the public hearing, to have a productive time at the public hearing to move this to advance this project. And I think it's a critical piece. I've heard about it from the community throughout, not just this work on this project, but through the Garibaldi Estates planning process. The traffic in the area is a major concern. And I think proceeding at this point to a public hearing with that piece floating as it is presents quite a risk to the overall project. So for that reason, I'm making the motion. Anyone else? Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, happy to support the motion on the floor. I do think it's important to have the information around the traffic impact assessment and the proposed solutions. It's something that council and the community have been asking for since this was first presented at committee of the whole, in order to try and better understand what can actually be supported on this site. Granted, it is an area that is well serviced by transit. It is centrally located. I think that generally we have fairly lenient policies around trying to support growth management in the right places. But I think that this proponent and the application that's been before us has been lacking in creativity in terms of how we actually achieve what we're trying to achieve, and just trying to put more on a site that perhaps can't actually achieve it. We've talked about trying to separate the employment spaces and the employment uses from the residential uses in order to make that employment space more viable. We've talked about reducing the mass and the site and the size of the buildings. And all of that has hinged on the fact that this is a really busy corridor and we don't have a really good solution for how we're going to move more vehicles through the area. Granted, we still have really big ambitions around trying to get people out of their vehicles. And so I think that this is a fair approach. Appreciate the frustration of the proponents at this point. The other option is that we vote it down. So that to me is the other option on the table. And maybe that's a clearer path forward.
Thank you. Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor Herford. I won't be supporting the motion. After being reviewed in 3 committee of the whole meetings and a bit more work after first reading, I think that this project is ready for a public hearing. And I have faith in our staff that the traffic situation can be addressed in a timely manner. The information given to us and anybody else that needs it in advance of the public hearing, such that there's enough time to review whatever is going to be presented in the traffic impact studies, which I'll remind everybody, apparently is a holdup at our end. The proponent is indicating their traffic impact information has been submitted, and what we're waiting on now is district requested traffic information, impact details. I would have liked to have sent this to public hearing.
Thank you. Other comments? Go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. I will also not be supporting the motion. I'm having a bit of a deja vu here with Scott Crescent 10 years ago when traffic impact or traffic routes flow plan were presented very late before the public hearing, last opportunity, and too late for public input. This frustrated the public hearing, and 10 years later, the neighbors, after changes needed to be made, neighbors are saying, we could have told you so. Here, however, I feel that the traffic issues and risks are better understood, and I do appreciate the comment made by Mr. Gibbons that council will have the opportunity to send the package back to second reading should we be dissatisfied or concerned about the traffic impact information that will come forward. So I'm happy to send this to public hearing at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments before I call the question? Seeing none. Oh, go ahead, Councilor Benningham.
Yeah, just sort of mulling my head over this. I do think there were, I appreciate this has gone to committee of the whole a few times, but what I read in the report is that from the last committee of the whole, there weren't a whole lot of changes then, and so, I think that's part of what we're trying to struggle with here is seeing some of what we thought was important to change, not being so, and maybe there's some good reasons for that. The traffic thing is a bit of a challenge because to me, partly our parking requirements are driving the need for a large amount of vehicles, which then causes more traffic aggravation. I think having more employment on site, or at least understanding where that local employment is going to be that matches the jobs, alleviates the need for some parking and alleviates some of the traffic thing. And so there's these competing things, and that some of them I think are from our end that are making this more challenging. I'd prefer to see less parking there, less vehicles, and be less worried then about the traffic, maybe a bit more employment. So that's how I would like to see some of these things resolved. So yeah, that's just what I'm wrestling with right now.
Okay, Councilor Hamilton.
Yeah, and I wrestling with, I think, slightly different things from Councillor Pettingill, but this is a challenging decision where clearly I understand that there is a convolution of the traffic impact assessment from the district and the traffic impact assessment from the proponent. It's a space where I think that a clearer line of sight from our perspective on what are the details that are outstanding would help clarify a decision, but I certainly don't want to see a traffic impact assessment come to the table right at the same time as a public hearing. I don't think that's a sufficient amount of time to digest the material.
Thank you. One thing I'd like to just point out before I call the question is that given that we can't receive new information after a public hearing, then we're setting ourselves up to have this information available March 19th, which was the date for the public hearing, which is followed by consideration a third reading. So I see that I know that we've introduced a delay, but I expect that delay to be minimal given the timelines that I'm reading from here, and that's why I'm taking this action. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Councillor Anderson, French opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we'll move on to, we've got an adoption of the District of Squamish Solid Waste Utility Regulation Bylaw. Moved by Councillor Stoner, second by Councillor French. No one's clamoring to speak to this one. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we're on to Heritage Management Strategy. Oh, Lomas Abraham. I'll give you a second to get set up, but the floor is yours when you're ready.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jessie Abraham, planning consultant. My project partner for this project is Denise Cook, heritage planner. She has joined online today. And we are the consultant team here to present the heritage management strategy for endorsement. Little bit of background. The first draft of the heritage management strategy was presented at the November 28th Committee of the Whole, at which time Council provided the following feedback to staff: to review and update neighborhood boundaries, to identify which short-term actions need to be prioritized, to consider a heritage expert on the advisory design panel, to recognize and represent Squamish Nation heritage and lands, to review historical information for accuracy and update as required, to highlight that this is a living document that shall be updated over time, and to identify high-risk buildings and features to address priorities in the short term. So since the November 28th Committee of the Whole meeting, the consultant team has worked with staff to review Council's feedback, gather further information, and incorporate revisions into the strategy. In addition, Squamish Nation has provided further suggestions that have been incorporated into the document. In response to Council's comments to consider this a living document that should be reviewed and updated over time and as new information is collected, the executive summary now highlights that the strategy is a living document as shown on the slide here. In response to Council's comments to identify and prioritize short-term actions, the strategy now highlights 3 priority actions. Priority number 1 is to amend the OCP and Land Development Procedures bylaw to designate a development approval information area for archaeological impact assessment. Priority action 2 is to develop a chance find protocol to strengthen cultural and archaeological resource protection. And priority action 3 is to conduct an archaeological overview assessment for the district. The actions are focused on identifying and documenting historical First Nations land use to help inform future actions and heritage management decisions. A budget is proposed for priority action number 3 to conduct an AOA for the district, which recommends a $100,000 budget to work with Squamish Nation and a qualified professional to develop a framework to protect archaeological resources in high development areas. Staff have been exploring grant opportunities to help fund this work and are preparing an application to UBCM's Local Government Development Approvals Program for funding. A resolution to support the work outlined in the priority actions and directing staff to pursue grant funding for the proposed activities is included in the report to Council. Except for priority actions that will be completed in the short term, all other actions will be completed in the medium term as staff time and capacity allows. Long-term and ongoing actions are unchanged. In response to Council's comments, the following revisions are proposed for individual actions. Action number 2.7, which is to embed heritage in development permit area guidelines, is now updated to include a heritage expert on the ADP to assist with reviewing DPA guidelines related to heritage values and conservation. Action 3.2, to establish the Squamish Heritage Registers updated to reference and incorporate results from the Archaeological Overview Assessment in the register to ensure an inclusive list of heritage places. Action 4.2, which is to develop an inventory of historical information, is updated to include review and update of the strategy and appendices as historical information is identified and inventoried to ensure accuracy of local history. Action 4.5, which is to develop a program for public storytelling, is updated to remove the recommendation to install interpretive signage at Squamish Nation spiritual sites, as these locations are sacred and should not be advertised to the public. With that, we recommend that Council endorse the District of Squamish Heritage Management Strategy and that Council supports the 3 priority actions identified in the Heritage Management Strategy and directs staff to pursue grant funding for the proposed activities. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, do we have any questions for our staff while we have them? Go ahead, Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor. I note from the strategy that not all the neighborhood context areas have descriptions. There's no description for Cheekeye, Alice Lake, and Masheter, University Highlands, which I think is more commonly known as University Heights, Golf Course, Ampaco Road, Mancom River, Mancom, the Business Park, Crumpet Woods, list kind of goes on. with that many omitted, I was thinking that maybe that's by design. So can you give us some idea of what's going on there with some described and some not?
Yes, thank you. Through the mayor, the neighborhoods included in the document are noted as examples only and are high-level neighborhood descriptions that should be added to and built out over time. Notably, further information is required regarding the First Nations reserve lands, which are also shown on the neighborhood map, as this requires further research and archaeological review.
Okay, that really speaks to the living document, portion of the living document. In the Heritage Advisory Working Group terms of reference, there's one section that indicates that unless appointed by the District of Squamish, the working group will elect the chairperson and, if applicable, vice chair annually. And I just don't understand what the if applicable part is. What would make it not applicable?
Yes, so through the chair, the intention is to provide workability or flexibility. So since the working group is not a formal committee or commission, there's no requirement per se for a vice chair, although it would be beneficial to have one to ensure meetings follow the process outlined in the terms of reference.
Okay, great. I've got one more. The budget for the Heritage Advisory Working Group looks like it will fall within the Community Planning Department. So is the next financial plan process expected to include a specific service level increase line item for this, or will it simply be baked into the Community Planning Department overall budget?
Yes, so the Heritage Advisory Working Group is a medium-term action that wouldn't be initiated for the next 4 to 5 years. The budget would be relatively small for items such as training, but the Advisory Working Group would be a committee of volunteers. I might pass it off regarding financial planning.
Thank you. Through the mayor, we haven't yet reflected any incremental cost this would represent in the 5-year financial plan.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you can clarify a little more what sort of engagement was done with Squamish Nation after when this came to the committee of the whole, and in particular, I wonder if Squamish Nation had an opportunity to review this draft.
Yes, thank you. Through the mayor. So they had the opportunity to review the priority actions as outlined in the strategy, and that was referred to Squamish Nation administration. There was also more opportunity for public engagement as the District of Squamish held an engagement fair at Totem Hall in January. So there's also an opportunity to share more information just about the heritage management strategy to the public.
Okay, and I guess my point of concern is the only sort of uncertainty remaining in my mind is Appendix C, neighborhood context statements, and Appendix F, case studies, statements of significance. And I understand there's much work to be done and these are not final and all, but I still have, and they're noted as appendices, but I still have some reservation about sort of the relative level of information about settler parts of our history versus the Squamish Nation piece, and what is the ratio there, and are these appendices better left as sort of stuff that we keep on file and the committee works with and sort of grows over time, but should that be in the same document even though it's just an appendice? And so I'm wondering if that in particular we had a perspective on Squamish Nation and the sort of relative level of current historical content, even if it is clearly identified as this is a work in progress.
Yeah, thank you. Through the mayor, Squamish Nation administration did not have any comments or feedback on the appendices. Since our committee of the whole meeting, we did add a note that this is supplemental information. Our hope is by prioritizing these short-term actions that are very much focused on working with First Nations and archaeological resource management, that we can reflect that work greater in the appendices that are included here.
Okay. Any other questions, Council? Councillor Anderson.
We have in the community several heritage groups. They have some specializations, each of them. There we have easily a good group of very capable and motivated folks that could potentially serve on an advisory board or commission. This may alleviate burdens on our staff. The priority actions will inevitably involve citizens and groups in the community, registry work, steps towards that, context statements and statements of significance. In other communities, these are actually undertaken by heritage commissions or committees and not by district staff or municipalities. So I'm wondering why is there rationale you may be able to relate as to why we would delay the establishment of an advisory board or heritage commission to a period of 4 to 5 years?
Through the mayor, it really relates to our capacity at the moment to implement any action. So we've narrowed it down to priority actions that have come out of conversations with Squamish Nation staff. And everything else essentially is delayed to at least 4 years from now for initiation. Setting up a commission or a committee, that will certainly take capacity. There may be long-term benefits of that from a workload perspective, but there's going to be a heavy lift to begin with. So given all the priorities that staff are working on, that's why it's in the medium term.
Thank you. My second question concerns our plans for a future civic hub, library improvements, or a new library facility. To what extent can the pre-development work that may be underway address the issue of space planning for an archives facility? Is that pre-development work at a different level or stage of progress, or can it at this time address something like circumstances for an archives facility? I will note that in the present report before us, there is an allocated or suggested space, square footage for an archives facility. However, that's actually the same as what the library had and had to give up, and so the materials are actually now stored in Burnaby. So I'm concerned that we should have a good idea going forward about what's involved with that facility. Can it be assigned to the pre-development work underway or about to get underway for a civic hub or a new library?
Thank you, through the mayor. I just want to share that one of the actions, 4.3, is to establish a community archive, including some language around how to do that and the possible square footage that would be required. And that has been shared with the real estate department to consider in their plans for the civic block.
Thank you. My final question, I'm going to cite a passage from our OCP. It's policy 2710C. Work with landowners and developers to sensitively preserve and incorporate natural, cultural, and built environment resources in their projects. So that's our current policy. My question to staff is, would that be, as we have it there, sufficient for conversations to be underway with developers or property owners regarding at-risk heritage assets today? And I will cite 3. In the Upper Mamcombe Blind Channel is a landscape feature. In fact, it's on Crown land, but it's adjacent to an ongoing construction project. And it is, in fact, the oldest built environment feature in the valley. And it was installed by Squamish Nation community members in 1906. The other is a building which may be able to be repurposed at 1551 Pemberton. And there are a few community groups interested to investigate repurposing it. And the third one is a shop building from the 1940s that contains valuable materials that may be able to be salvaged, something that's in a theme already in your report, Ms. Abraham. And so I'm wondering whether we have enough policy behind us to entertain discussions with those property owners and developers regarding alerting them and potentially conserving those assets at this time. Thank you.
Through the mayor, do we have enough policy? I believe we have enough policy. Do we have capacity and clear direction? Not at this point. We review heritage resources when applications come in. You know, if we don't have a heritage register yet, so that's to come. But we do try to flag any unofficial sources that we may have about a property and what's on it. So, you know, we're on our way, but it's going to take a bit longer to get there before we can say that we can with certainty that we can identify heritage resources as opportunities come up.
Thank you. I'll just follow up that one of the three buildings, the property owner developer is very highly motivated and keen to work with community groups. The other two property owners may not even be aware of the assets that exist on their development sites. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, thank you through the chair. Thanks for the update since our last discussion on this. I'm just curious about the staff recommendation and the second component, which says support the 3 priority actions identified in the heritage management strategy and direct staff to pursue grant funding for the proposed activities. Appreciate the additional work in terms of identifying the top 3 critical priority action areas. And while most of these aren't necessarily budget line items, they are staff time and capacity. And so I'm just wondering if staff can speak to how we integrate this. We're in the midst of our strategic plan review. There's a lot of work that's come down the pipeline and some context has changed. And so I'm just wondering how staff are thinking about how we integrate this, given the recommendation that's on our agenda this evening.
Through the mayor, we certainly don't have additional capacity to take on new work. And when we took on the heritage management strategy, it wasn't clear what the outcomes will be. Now that we're here and have had engagement with Squamish Nation, you know, those priority actions is what staff are recommending pursuing for the time being. Yes, it will take staff resources, but it does also kind of work that depends on consulting work as well. So the biggest piece, I think, in those 3 recommendations is the archaeological overview assessment. And that would largely be done by consultants who are working with Squamish Nation and district staff, but led by a consultant. Also because it relates to Squamish Nation, and that's a really important relationship that we think it's worthy of assigning our capacity to.
Yeah, thanks for that context. I'm also just curious and appreciate the additional engagement that's happened with Squamish Nation, and the identification of these priorities have come through conversation with the nation. We're also in the midst of the next steps that are coming out of the protocol agreement and trying to identify an MOU. And so I'm just curious how this would dovetail with those other conversations with the nation around capacity, both within our organization and within the nation, in order to do some of this joint work. That might be a question for the CAO.
Thank you. Through the mayor, it's an excellent question and would be an appropriate place to direct this work in terms of ensuring that our prioritization and Squamish Nation staff prioritization also matches the prioritization of the higher level staff and council at Squamish Nation. And this council, through that memorandum of understanding that is looking at specific work commitments between the 2 governments for both staff and councils to work on in the forthcoming years. So one way to prioritize this work would be to refer it to that MOU process. Thank you.
Councillor Stoner, that's good for now. Any other questions? We have recommendations before us. Councillor Anderson?
Mayor Herford, I'd like to move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Hamilton. Okay, would you like to speak to it?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, sorry, we need your microphone there.
In 2005, the planning department came forward with a report to council on the need for a heritage strategy. Its recommendations are broadly similar to that provided by our team today. At the time, council decided there were other priorities. It's a long time since. And this time around, I think, again, we must give kudos to our planning department for taking initiative with this heritage management strategy project. It was an initiative of our staff and not by council, again. Heritage is not only archaeology and pre-contact First Nations culture and legacies. We have 24 decades of shared history. And it is in this light that the provincial government is undertaking a transformation project relative to the Heritage Conservation Act. And it's had substantial input from around the province, including from First Nations, and all are in agreement that the arbitrary cutoff date of 1846 for conservation legislation is colonial. And we have all of the First Nations input agrees that we need to take into account these 24 plus decades of shared history. In other words, it's not something that we would relegate to say a memorandum of understanding with the Squamish Nation. Heritage is bigger than that. And the First Nations input for the provincial government agrees with this. The tactic 6.4 in the Arts, Cultural and Heritage Strategy, which addresses spaces needs and spaces plannings, is missing from the list of policies in the report to Council. Its relevance is spaces for exhibits, which we lack in this community, and the archives facility, which is a space planning project. I suggest then that we do ongoing work in looking at other communities and what they're doing with archives facilities, as well as heritage strategies and policies all around. Finally, I do regret that we're not going to be able to get underway with a heritage commission or board at this time. It seems to me that that would be in harmony with one of our strategic plan objectives: build relationships with community groups to increase community capacity and resources. But that said, I suggest we make a start. And I think we're making a good one with this report to Council, and so it has my full support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I had Councillor French next.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm happy with where we're at with heritage issues and with the content of the strategy that's in front of us. Clearly, a great deal of work has been put into this report, and I really appreciate that it has come back to us with more emphasis on Squamish Nation history, traditions, and culture. I think that that was something that Council expressed fairly clearly the last time that we saw this, and I'm happy with how those involved in the project clearly listened and came back with, I think, for the most part, we were looking for. Excited for what happens next with this process.
Thank you. Other comments? Councillor Penningill.
Yeah, appreciate all the work on this, and I am supportive of the resolution. I just want to sort of highlight, while we do have 24 decades of shared history with Squamish Nation, the nation has over 1,000 decades of history here. And I think that's where, you know, I see real effort on behalf of our staff to really pay mind to that. But I also sort of see how we are still very used to doing things the way that we're used to doing them, and we know our history, and so we can it's much more easy for us to pull that up and sort of use that as examples and so on. But it's sort of that piece that I can see we're really working hard, and I appreciate that, to sort of understand how we do better at that and get sort of a more, I'll say, appropriate ratio between the attention we're paying to the different parts of the history. And I'll mention, you know, I did discuss this agenda item coming up with someone who's quite active in Squamish Nation who's not been involved in this particular project. And the anxiety when I mentioned we're doing a heritage study was palpable. And so there's a lot of concern, and rightly so, about how we're handling this. So I think our focus, our priority focus in the short term is very appropriate. And I hope we keep making progress the way we've been doing. And so thanks to staff for this.
Thank you. Any other comments? Speaking in support of the motion, I think this is an important step to take, but we have a long way to go to fully realize what could be possible through heritage management strategy. And I really do appreciate the recommendation coming forward that reflects the importance of the work and of the recommended items, as well as crucially are the resources of the municipality to stretch further. So this is a very much a starting point, and I think it's a extremely appropriate one. So thank you for all your work, and I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. So next up, we have Garibaldi Springs LDA amendment.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Susan Stratus.
Hi, Susan.
And
Thank you for joining us,
consulting-
Ms. Stratus.
Thank you.
I'll just, Mr. Valencius, is there a presentation for this?
Yes.
Yes, there is. And I would like to introduce Susan Stratus, our planning consultant, who's joining us not in chambers, online. And Susan has a presentation ready to go, I believe. Over to you, Susan.
Thank you. Sorry for jumping the gun there. I just want to double check that my presentation is up on the screen.
It is not.
All right. Well, let me just go back to the main screen here and try this again. Here we are.
I feel like we're moving in the right direction, Ms. Stratus, but I don't see any content yet. We have a big, there we go.
There we go.
I think just presentation mode and.
Okay. There we go. Is everyone seeing the full screen now?
Yes, thank you very much. Take it away.
Okay, thank you. The presentation tonight is dealing with some additional amendments to the land development agreement for the Garibaldi Springs development. Just quickly for some background, the OCP and zoning amendments were adopted in 2018, which provide for 310 units maximum on the site, broken into the 4 parcels that are shown on the map on the left. Parcel A is largely constructed at this point and moving toward the first occupancy permits. And parcel B has had the development permit issued last July and is moving toward the first phase of building permits for that parcel. The majority of the land, 78%, is to be dedicated to district ownership for ecological reserve and park use. And of that total amount, the active park is actually relatively small at 1.2 hectares. The servicing agreement for the park construction was just issued last month in January 2024. The environmental values on this site are extremely high. I think we've known throughout this that high habitat values for many species of amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals, as well as all of the watercourses being fish-bearing, have really dictated a lot of the site design. The western toad critical breeding sites were identified and brought forward to council in 2022 for discussion, and that resulted in some changes to the park design. Just looking quickly at how the plan for the project preserves the habitat. Under the earlier golf course use, approximately 50% of the land was preserved as a naturalized area. And under the new proposal that's being built out, that increases to 72% with much larger contiguous areas of habitat. So in September 2022, we came to council to discuss the impacts of the new information of the western toad breeding habitat. And that resulted in a number of changes to what is considered to be the hub park in front of the hotel. The previous design on the left had spread a number of facilities out, including community gardens and a kids pump track up in the northern quadrant. those were changed considerably. The community gardens were moved off-site with a cash contribution by Polygon to the Squamish Can Society. And the kids pump track was moved to an entirely different area of the park. So that left most of the active use facilities in the southwest quadrant adjacent to Pond 7. And council did endorse these changes when we met in September 22. And this plan just shows the pump track and bike skills park being combined in what's called the South Pocket Park. It also has seating and covered picnic areas. One of the issues that I know has come up recently is the commitment to the corridor trail extension, and I just thought I'd bring this map forward because this was part of the original rezoning and OCP amendment. The extension of the corridor trail adjacent to Tantalus Road going up as far as Dowd, and then what is listed as the Wonderland Trail extension going up further to the highway overpass. Those trail constructions are part of the recently issued servicing agreement that was just issued in January, and the construction is now underway for those trail portions. So moving to 2024, what we've brought forward today are some, I guess, some fine tuning of the park construction. Between 2022 and 24, there has been additional work done at the district looking in more detail at the Western Toad habitat. A Western Toad habitat management plan was provided by Polygon and reviewed by the district, and there was a fair bit of discussion about how the habitat needs were fitting with the approved park plans. And in the end, the park plan for what we're considering to be the hub park, shown as phase 1 in the middle of the diagram here, was not changed. I guess there were a number of potential changes, but I think the outcome was that the main management tool will be to close the park probably during periods in June or July when the toad migration is happening, and that's probably going to be the most effective form of management. So what is proposed now are some additional amendments to the land development agreement. They're starting back in the original land development agreement. Originally, everything was supposed to be done by the time the final occupancy permit was issued for phase 1. What we're proposing now is a finer breakdown of these completion dates that's more realistic and, I guess, practical from a development point of view, so that the public is not moving through construction zones. So there's no change proposed to phase 1. That trail section adjacent to the roadway has actually been constructed. And there's no change proposed for the phase 2 trails, which consist of the link from Dowd Drive as well as the north-south link between these two residential areas. That will also be constructed by the final occupancy permit of Lot B, which is expected to be done by November 2026. Where the changes are proposed is for the riparian plantings, which the developer has requested be extended to May 1st, 2025. And I guess the reasons there are they've got hundreds of thousands of plants to put in, and most of these can only be done during select windows. They've got fisheries windows to consider, and also seasonal planting windows for the survival of the plants. So for those reasons, they've requested extension to May 1st, 2025. And I guess an additional reason is just simply acquiring these native plants in those numbers has been a challenge also. So the other requested change is for the phase 1 park, which consists of the accessible loop trail, as well as the development of the playground area, pardon me, and the pump track bike skills park. Kind of all of that is considered to be phase 1. They've requested an extension to November of this year or prior to the final occupancy permit for the first phase of the phase 2 units, whichever of those two is soonest. So that's not a huge delay, I think, from planning department perspective, but it is a change from what was originally considered. And there's no change proposed to the final phase 3 trail at the south end of the site, which will be done concurrently with the occupancy permit for lot C or lot D. And I won't read through these. I have included in the council agenda the actual wording changes that are needed to implement the changes I've just described. And they're both within the LDA document and the table that is the kind of overview table. And these changes are listed in the council report. The next steps are for staff and the applicant's lawyers to complete the revised LDA document based on input from council tonight. The district and developer will then sign the LDA amendment and it will be registered on title, and completion of the park and habitat restoration, which is ongoing as we speak. So the recommendation is that council authorize the mayor and corporate officer to execute the amendments to the Garibaldi Springs LDA as described in the council report tonight. And that's it for my presentation.
Thank you very much. Council, we have questions on this? Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, Ms. Stratus, I was wondering if you can clarify, there's a number of things that have been shifted to either the earlier date of November 1st, 2024, or final occupancy of the first phase of phase 2, which I've heard is November 2026. And that feels like a big difference. And so I'm just wondering if you can clarify if I have those dates right. And if it is actually a 2-year gap, why are we even entertaining the second component?
I think I may just share my screen again if I can do that. I think I possibly expressed that wrong, so let me just see if I'm still on screen here. Here we are.
Yep, we see your presentation. So
I will just go back to the map where this is laid out. The parts of the project of the park that are extended to either November 1st, 2024 or prior to the final occupancy permit for the first phase of phase 2. And that's the difference, is that the whole of phase 2, the completion date is November 2026. But the phrasing here is that it's just the first phase of phase 2. Phase 2 is going to be broken down into 3-4 possible phases, and the park will be completed prior to the final occupancy permit for the first phase of that phase 2. So it's somewhat convoluted wording and possibly confusing, but the entire of phase 2 will be done by November 2026, just for information. But the phase 1 parks and will be done by the time that first part of phase 2 is completed, if that helps.
Thanks for straightening out the various phases of the various different lots and the various components.
Yes.
I guess my subsequent question is, have we issued a building permit for the first phase of phase 2?
No, the building permits are expected to be issued soon. The development permit was issued and the building permit submitted for the first phase. And I believe they may be issued very soon for that first phase. I'm sorry, I didn't look up how many units. Another staff person is handling phase 2. I don't know how many units, but it should be very soon. The building permits are in process.
Okay, that just reiterates my question of like, why even put that second component in? It feels like November 1st, 2024 will definitely happen before final occupancy permit of the first phase of phase 2, which hasn't even gone through building permit.
The developer, sorry, through the mayor, the developer requested that wording so that there was a bit of leeway there and we didn't have to necessarily come back to amend the LDA again. That wording gives a bit of a window for the park to be completed. And you're correct that, you know, we do expect the building permit to be issued soon. And I think that November 1st and that building permit, or sorry, occupancy permit will probably be quite close in time, but the developer wanted a little bit of leeway there. That's the reason for that wording.
Councillor French? We can come back to you, Councillor Stoner. I can see you kind of mulling over the response. Go ahead, Councillor French.
Thanks, Mayor. Clause 8B refers to habitat restoration related to environmental protection and the ecological reserve. And the new timing is May of 2025. This is not as precise timing as compared to some of the other items. So I'm just wondering if that sort of month of May is by design, or should we be looking to be more precise and make it May 1st or May 31st, 2025? Does this even matter?
Through the chair, I'm just having to look up what we've actually said in clause 8B. I don't have that wording directly in front of me. Hang on here. And we'll just move forward. Through the mayor, I'm not seeing the reference that you just quoted. Could you repeat that for me?
Okay, so all I put in my notes is clause 8B referring to habitat restoration related to environmental protection and the ecological reserve. I didn't note any page numbers or section 3.
Section.
Okay, yeah. What page is that in our?
Page 169 of 213 at the bottom, and it kind of overflows into page 170 of our overall package.
Thank you, Mayor.
So it's Schedule D, Community Benefits Table. Section 3 speaks to 18, subset B.
If I could assist here. So I'm looking at the land development agreement through the mayor. And it does for section 18B, it's May 1st, 2025 for habitat restoration.
All right, great. So there is a precise date. That's great. Now, Mayor, I also have questions that are not directly related, but do relate to the land development agreement. And I'm thinking I don't want to detract from what Ms. Stratis is asking us to deal with, because my questions are around the developer funded active transportation trail.
I'll advise that I think you can ask a question there. We do have, it did form part of the presentation. It was mentioned, but let's see but there's limits to that. So venture your question. We'll see where we land.
Perfect. So I do want to understand the level of commitment that we're at with the Wonderland Extension Trail and the work that's taking place on that project north of Dowwood Drive. My questions include, have costs been sunk into that portion of the trail? Have we entered into contracts that will be costly to potentially get out of if we decide that we don't wish to proceed with that section of the trail. And if council wanted to pause that part of the project and have staff evaluate what our options are for potentially abandoning that segment of the current path construction project, could the funding be reallocated to some other place? So that's a lot of questions, but I just
let's see if we can get some answer. Sorry, your first question. Let's go shorter. First question.
Have costs being sunk into the portion of the trail that's to be built north of Dowd Drive along Tantalus?
Through the mayor, I believe construction has just started, and the servicing agreement that was issued in January, issued by the district and signed with the developer, does include that portion of trail. And the reason for that is it has always been part of the program, both in the rezoning and OCP amendment. That trail was shown, and it has been shown in the park plans that are attached to the servicing agreement. So I think in terms of costs being sunk, I think the developer has sunk costs in terms of preparing the plans, the detailed engineering drawings, etc. And contracts have been issued for the construction. So I think in terms of pausing it at this point, I would have to defer to Jonas for comment on that.
Through the mayor, I can just echo what Ms. Strata said, in that contracts are likely have been assigned for this work, but we don't know for sure. We have to check with the developer, and then any consequences won't be able to answer in this meeting. We'll have to come back in the future.
Ms. Glende?
Thank you. Through the mayor, it's important to note as well that a servicing agreement has been signed with the developer. So that's an agreement with the district and requirements that the district has asked for, as well as what the developer offered to provide in that agreement. To delay or stop any work would require reopening that servicing agreement, which we don't recommend.
Okay. Thank you. That answers the next question that I had.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
I think just picking up on Councillor French's line of questioning, appreciate that we don't want to reopen the servicing agreement. I'm curious, what level of engagement do we do? The differentiation between what's included in the LDA drawing of the corridor extension versus what is now being proposed and driven by the developer, I feel like are different levels of information. And so I'm just like, the question is a process one of like, what level of engagement do we do when it comes to projects that we've secured through rezoning and then the implementation thereof? Because it's not something that we talk about at rezoning. We're told that's too much detail and it'll be dealt with at servicing agreement. And then when we come to servicing agreement, we get a lot of questions and it's a challenging place to be. So I was wondering if staff can reflect on that a little bit.
Through the mayor, I'll just defer to Jonas, but I did want to mention that this rezoning application was a bit atypical in that there was a lot of detail early in the process. The corridor trail and Wonderland Trail extension were shown on the development plans and then the developer's submissions, I would say going back as far as 2018, and those were generated from discussions with the community, as well as district staff looking for active transportation links. They're fairly important links to complete the active transportation network in that area. So these plans, I certainly recall them being shown at public hearings and public meetings throughout that rezoning process. I don't believe it's new information, but it certainly may be new information to people, some people now, several years later. But it was, there was a lot of public participation through this process.
Ms. Glendale?
Thank you, through the mayor. This particular project is one where, upon reflection, is a good learning for staff in terms of, yes, a lot of engagement happened at the time. And then when ground was being broken to actually do the project, there'd been a gap. And the team implementing the project was full steam ahead to do the project. In future, what we want to do is put in a system or a process check for those teams to communicate with our communications department so that we can get ahead of it. And then council's not hearing questions from people that would not be aware of this project that was rezoned many years ago. So that is definitely an area where we endeavor to do better.
Council, other questions? Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, I just want to pick up, and I apologize. I was a bit confused, or I still am, but picking up on Councillor Stoner's, there's a few things in here where we have a completion date prior to the earliest of November 1st, 2024, or occupancy permit for the first phase of phase 2, which we have said, I think, is 2026-ish, or the developer wanted flexibility. But it seems that with the wording we have in here, they don't have any flexibility. They kind of have to get it done by November 1st, 2024. And so is there an error in our wording? Like, are we meant to sort of say within that range? Or because it sort of reads that November 1st, 2024 is the deadline.
Through the mayor, I'll just respond to that again. I actually agree the wording is a bit unusual. We're not looking at a 2-year gap in those dates. It's probably a matter of months, but the developer requested this wording. We originally talked about having just a hard date of November 1st, 2024. And I guess with all of the various unknowns in the park and trail construction, they were concerned about having to come back to amend the LDA again if there was even a minor holdup in the work. So by having it with the alternative being the final occupancy permit for the first phase of phase 2, and again, I understood that's a bit confusing, but it's not all of phase 2. It's just the first group of units for phase 2.
Go ahead, Councillor Pettingill, and perhaps if you can cite the specific clause that has you tripped up.
Sure, I'm looking at a few of them. The one I'm looking at is number 8 in, for example, in, I think, with development permit application or subdivision agreement, section 3.8, I think, if I've got my numbering right. Off-site trails, it's just one example. But as I read it, I think what we're saying is we want the latter of November 1st or phase 2, because if it's the earlier of, the longest they have is November 1st, and the flexibility is to go earlier if phase 2 comes earlier, which doesn't sound like is the intent.
Through the mayor, I think the developer was trying to make clear that their commitment is to get this done as quickly as possible. I didn't read this as a question of delaying. I think possibly a way through this is to simply have these clauses, which is repeated in a few places, simply refer to November 1st, 2024. If this is a troublesome clause for council, I think if we just went with November 1st, 2024 and understood that the developer may need to return, that is another way of handling this.
Councillor Stoner?
I guess another way to seek clarification on this is, do we penalize or have to change the LDA if it's done sooner? So right now, as I read this, it's November 1st, 2024 as like the latest deadline. If they complete it earlier, then great.
Through the mayor, there's no penalty if you complete sooner. The heading of that clause is that the timing completion is required prior to. So there's no, there's no penalty for completing sooner.
If I could just add also to add to the confusion potentially. Sometimes we include occupancy, and when we're kicking things further down the road, we include occupancy as a backstop that development can't move forward unless something is completed. So in this case, it's the park. The wording is certainly not clear here, but I think it still works because given this wording, the park will have to be completed before November 1st, 2024, because there's probably not a physical way you can get to occupancy permit on the second phase. But if you can, you still won't be able to proceed unless the park is completed. That's how I would read it.
I think I think I understand staff's perspective on this and this wording. I still find the wording a bit challenging and doesn't, to me, provide the flexibility that we were after. But we've got many eyes on this. We've asked, so whether that's comfort level enough for council or not, I guess is maybe the next question. But Councillor Pettingill, sorry, I have Councillor Hamilton as well. I don't know if he's spoken to this, but you got us started, Councillor Pettingill. So let's go there. And
Yeah, just to be clear, I don't have an issue with November 1st. It does seem that's not achieving what I think I heard the developer wanted. So I wonder if we're just setting ourselves up to come back, like if we should just defer this to next meeting and get clarity on these clauses. Is that the better path, or should we just go ahead with November 1st as been recommended?
well, we just heard an explanation where staff felt that it did achieve that goal. So I guess I think that question is more for us, Councillor Pettingill. But go ahead, Councillor Hamilton.
Yeah, just to seek clarity for this off-site trails item that Councillor Pettingill brought up. This agreement, could you please confirm, this agreement does require them to have that completed by November 1st, full stop. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, the clause referring to the off-site trail, which is sub-item 8, requires them to be completed the earlier of November 1st, 2024, or final occupancy permit for the first phase of the phase 2 units. It does have that alternative completion time in there tied to occupancy permits. So that's that applies to the off-site trails and to the community park itself. So we've used that, and I should mention that that clause with the optional completion dates was actually vetted both by the developer's lawyer and the district's lawyer. It did make sense to all of us at the time. It did seem to work. But yes, in answer to your question, the off-site trails are subject to that either or clause, the earliest of.
Go ahead.
So what I'm seeking is clarification of the meaning of that or clause. Is it correct to state that the 1st of November 2024 is the latest date that they would be allowed to deliver this amenity?
Well, that's
So
yes, that's not how it's written.
at the request of staff, we're going to take a timeout. So we'll recess for 10 minutes and we'll come back at 5 after. Thank you. We're in recess. Okay, we're back from recess, and we had an outstanding question or questions to staff. Is there who's best position? Okay, Mr. Vilnius, I'll take it away.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to go back and relook at it outside of the council chambers. It's always good to take a fresh look at it, to legal agreements especially. So it is certainly our understanding that the latest date by which these works have to be done is November 1st, 2024. And if for some reason the development fast-tracked ahead and finished occupancy, finished to the point where phase 2 is ready for occupancy, that section would then kick in.
Thanks. Thank you for that clarity. Kelsey, did that look after, I know that looked after sort of a category of questions because the wording was sprinkled throughout the LDA. Any other questions before we entertain a motion? Seeing none, are you moving the staff recommendation? Are you seconding? So Councillor Stoner moved, Councillor French seconds. Would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, just briefly, I think that this makes good sense and appreciate staff taking the time to confer that we were all on the same page with the timing. That I think that extension to November 1st, 2024 is reasonable. If it happens sooner, then great. And also just want to, it's not specific to this recommendation or what's before us, but want to acknowledge staff's point of view in terms of the lessons learned in this project and the time that has elapsed. That has been a component in terms of, I know a lot of communication in the community right now, and something that we continue to deal with as we try and learn from these processes that extend over multiple years and our community changes. But these agreements were signed long before some of us were even around this table. So appreciate the reflection that has happened both around council table as well as within staff and hopefully with our community around how we continue to improve our processes going forward. So I'm happy to support the motion on the floor.
Thank you. Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, also happy to support the changes. I think they're sensible given all the constraints we're facing. And I was reminded just the amount of work from a local community group, the Squamish Environment Society, to make sure that, you know, we achieved an ecological preserve so large and that so much attention is being paid to things that I think many people in our community hold dear. And so just sort of want to highlight the expertise and the dedication in our community to things that many of us hold dear, and I think have made this a really positive project overall with a significant positive change compared to what was there before. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson?
Thank you. I'll speak in favor of the resolution or staff recommendation before us. There has been some concern among members of the public regarding the trail in the northerly part of the project vicinity. Staff have explained that contracts have been assigned and that a delay would involve stoppage of work and a servicing agreement being reopened. I'd like to express appreciation for the comments made by our CAO, Linda Glenday, and I hope I capture them relatively correctly, that there has been a learning for staff and that in future a process check so that our communications department can get ahead of things. I think this is very valuable observation, not only for a project like this. It was a contentious matter, the Garibaldi Springs project, as was the Scott Crescent development 10 years ago. In that case, there was a NIMBY label applied to a whole adjacent neighborhood, and it was contentious. And so planning details and issues were missed. In the Scott Crescent case, also details regarding a pedestrian trail, plans, and misinterpreted or real needs, it was missed. So that I appreciate that we are recognizing that we need to have a disciplined approach and be prepared well enough to facilitate a holistic, fulsome, careful review and communications process for a development project proposal or for a sub-area plan or neighborhood plan. Conflict is the enemy, and we should be careful always to not get, or when this arises, to stay above it and ahead of it so that planning details such as a trail in this case or in other cases are hopefully not missed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'm happy to support these, what we have before us. I think really with a project of this size, I think the original agreement was very, very thorough, but when you get into the complexity of actually executing these things, adjustments like this are totally appropriate as the complexities really come to light. So happy to support. I'll call question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
So next we're on to public safety. So UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Fund grant applications. I will turn it over to Ms. Latimer.
Thank you. Through the mayor, and just to introduce myself to the community, my name is General Manager of Public. My name is Megan Latimer. I'm the General Manager of Public Safety. I have online our Emergency Program Manager, Ryan Donahue, who's actually going to be presenting this item. So I will hand it over to him.
Good evening, Mayor Herford and Council. Ryan Donahue, Emergency Program Manager here for the district. I'm here this evening to ask for support of two funding streams under the UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Funds. Both of these grants we have pursued in previous years to build capacity. Are you able to hear me okay? Everybody?
It's quite faint. I don't know if you can be closer to your microphone or
Okay.
project to the
Sure.
back of the room, as it were.
Yeah, no problem. As I was mentioning, both of these grants fall under the UBCM Community Emergency Preparedness Funds. The district has applied for these funds for the past few years. Both of these grants, the Emergency Support Services, which is a grant that helps us build capacity to respond and recover from events that displace, evacuate, or basically cause people to evacuate from their homes due to disaster. The second one, the Emergency Operations Center grant, allows the district to build capacity to respond and recover to emergency events within the district itself. Just for a bit of context, in the previous years, for instance, last year, we were able to purchase some radio communications equipment with the EOC grant to build in some redundancies should we have any fails in the current systems. We were also able to build out some supplies in the disaster hub that was put behind Brennan Park. So building sort of an emergency cache in the event of a disaster, i.e. an earthquake. This year, the proposed activities will attempt to build capacity further. So in emergency support services, we're looking to mobilize some of these resources so that they're more readily deployable in the event of a disaster that presents itself, where we would have to provide potentially some mutual aid to another community or to move our group lodging or reception centers to a different location within the district. And under the Emergency Operations Center grant, we're also looking to build capacity through providing training and exercises, as well as to purchase some equipment to update some of the current technology that is kind of aged out in the EOC. And this particular equipment is not actually within the facility itself, but part of the infrastructure that we use during a response. So both of these grants are completely funded entirely by UBCM and 100% cost recoverable for the sum of $30,000 each. These grants are part of the 24 to 28 financial plan that has been approved. And if successful, the Squamish Emergency Program will continue to pursue the application of these funding streams, as well as administer these grants in 2024. These grants also do support the 2023-2026 strategic plan in the sense that they help us build capacity around hazard mitigation and building resiliency within our organization. In light of the impacts that we're seeing over the past few years in climate change, the ability to increase capacity and build resiliency is becoming extremely important, especially for the district, as you know, we face a number of hazards that continue to grow in severity year after year: wildfires, flooding, these sort of things that cause evacuation of individuals in our community. So increasing capacity and resiliency is obviously a priority for our program. And if this is supported, we will continue to pursue these applications and build capacity within not just the emergency support services, but the emergency operations center within the district. And that's all I have for you this evening. So if there's questions, I'm happy
Thank
to answer
you
them.
very much for the description. Do you have any questions, Council? We also have recommendations. We can go right there if that's where we're going. Councillor French, are you moving? Staff recommendation, second by Councillor Hamilton. Would you like to speak to it?
Yes, I would like to. Thank you. It's great that we get to see the details of these grant funding applications. I appreciate that. And as noted by Mr. Donahue, we're coming off of a summer that included forest fires close-ish to our community and some minor flooding. Although for folks who were victims of that flooding, it probably didn't feel minor. If we need to make more frequent use of our emergency operations center and we need it more often, I'm very confident that if we get this grant, it'll be money well used. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, happy to support the staff recommendation in the applications, and just a thanks for continuing to pursue these areas of grant funding and for the update that you provided in your comments about what we did with last year's grant funding. That was one of my questions, was whether we've been successful in our past applications. So it's great to see that we are both applying for it and we are successful in using that to build our capacity. So that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Speaking in support of the motion, I really being prepared for emergency is part of what helps me sleep at night when I hear the rain thundering down on the roof and we feel the heat of the summer. So I think that this application, if successful, just will continue to build on our successes and leave us well positioned to tackle whatever unknown is ahead. So thank you very much for your work on this. We'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
So okay. Next up, we have the resolutions for Lower Mainland Local Government Association, AGM. So effectively to make recommendations to the province through that process. These have been discussed at council. This is our opportunity to fine tune them or submit as we see. We don't have a presentation here. This is we're supported by staff to keep us on side with where we need to be with these, but these are our pieces. So I'll propose that we go through from the first, just in the order that they appear in the agenda, just to give them a quick pass to see, and if and see if any need to be debated further before we action these. So First was the registration of notice of latecomer charges on property title motion. So everybody, any questions on this one or any recommended edits or showstoppers for anybody? Nope, I'm happy to move through these that quickly if that's what happens. So increasing reliable transit funding to support growing communities. Well, I just want to make sure that if there's anything we surface and we go through, and then we'll just do them all together. So I just want to run through these just to give everyone the opportunity so you don't have to necessarily make a motion and pull one. Although that explanation probably ate up the time that we saved, but that's what I'm trying to think of. Anything with this transit funding piece that needs to be discussed further or amended? No. BC assessment, the property value accuracy. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just going back to the reliable transit, there's still a typo. Sorry, in the second last line, requested and to move to from annual funding.
Just on that, I did chat with Melissa just before this and flagged it with her. So it has been noted.
Okay, thank you. Because unless that wording changes the outcome. No, Councillor Penigo.
But just in general, my understanding with these is that when we move these, we do accept sort of after the fact spelling, grammatical corrections.
Although if we see one, we can use our hive mind to point them out. That's fine. But generally, they will get another pass before they're submitted. Where were we? That was the the BC assessment piece. That one makes sense to everybody, and everybody's okay. The increasing nope, sorry. Oh yeah, sorry, I was a page behind. The improved assessment of cumulative effects on major projects. That one makes sense. And then the improved local government capacity for environment assessment participation. Also makes sense. Okay, I was thinking there might be some adjustment to some wordings somewhere, although I didn't have any, so I'm happy that we made it that far. So then I would look, we can move these as a block to are you moving those, Councillor Hamilton? Thank you. Second by Councillor French. Thank you. Any comments? Yeah, Councillor French, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. So I wanted to thank my council colleagues for the work generally, and specifically the work on the motion related to BC assessment. What we have here in the way of wording really has been a team initiative. The feedback that I got from council was really valuable in syncing up with the former BC assessment employee who has been guiding me through this. So thank you, because this resolution wouldn't be as strong as I think it is, and generated the provincial interest that it apparently has in the last couple of days without the collaborative work that we've had here. So speaking in favor.
Thank you, Councillor French. Any other comments? Yeah, speaking in support of the motion and the motions, I think that advocating to other orders of government is an important part of our role. And when some of these things pertain to benefit us directly, and others are just are not just but are about procedural fairness and distribution of taxation appropriately, as well as improvements to processes that have come to light by us participating in those processes and not having a good time. So hope to prevent other communities from having to go through that as well. So I think these represent the wide range of challenges that we see as a local government. So I'm happy to advance them. I'll call a question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So we have no late agenda items. Correspondence, we didn't have any correspondence action requested, but we did have correspondence referred from the consent agenda. So Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, thanks. And so we had a series of letters from My Sea to Sky. I pulled these because they relate to a number of effluent permits and other topics that, as a council, we have discussed and made resolutions about. And so I think it's useful to have on our agenda with the attachments, the ability for the public to be aware. I did want to highlight one of the things that came up over and over again is Fortis's assertion they have no obligation to consider cumulative impacts of their effluent permit. And so for those that were paying attention, one of our LML, Lower Mainland Local Government Association resolutions deals specifically with missing cumulative assessments. And so that, I think, shows the appropriateness of that resolution. I'll also just highlight, I think this process, when I read through the documentation and the professional scientists and experts that have been hired by a local community group, shows some of the serious gaps in our system. And I'm thankful that we have the community groups adding scrutiny to these projects. There are some, still from my perspective, some big holes around redundancy in terms of water treatment. On first blush, Fortis's answers seem quite, oh, okay, great, it's taken care of. But then when you see the sort of expert response and digging in and analyzing a little bit, it sort of raises the flags again. So glad at the very least we have members of the community looking into this. Glad to have council support to give a bit of time to this. But it is also frustrating that it is down to us and individuals in the community to deal with these things rather than the provincial regulatory agencies, which is rightly where this should be done, I think, with a greater level of scrutiny than is done right now. But thanks to all that have been participating and paying attention. And with that, I'll make a motion to receive.
Thank you. I'll second that that motion. Any other comments on this correspondence? I'd like to echo my colleagues' appreciation for the engaged. I think engaged community is a gross understatement of these particular folks and the amount of the work that they've done to highlight the challenges and the various or the holes in the various processes throughout this process so far. So I'm thankful for that, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to it, Councilor Brenningill. I'll call a question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We had no approval of minutes referred from the consent agenda. Any business arising from the minutes? No. We have no committee minutes or reports. Any notice of motion, Council? Seeing none, we have no council staff and camera announcements. We had no unscheduled public attendance. Open question periods. If anyone in the audience has any questions or clarification related to agenda items, this would be the opportunity. Seeing no hands for that, we'll go to council or staff announcements. Councilor French.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to share that I had the honor of being asked to speak at the Multicultural Festival at Totem Hall on Saturday, February the 10th. The event was well attended with Mayor Herford and Councillor Pettingill also in attendance. And it's an event that truly reflects the cultural diversity that we have here in Squamish. Every year, the event brings together people from many religious groups, ethnicities, differing values. Many attended in traditional dress of whatever group they identify with, or country or region that they're from. It's just a great example of an event that reflects well on Squamish. And I observed that really it's a crowd that checks egos at the door, comes in open-minded to the values of others, and then it's a celebration of both differences and shared values. We could really, I think, inspire the world to take that on the way Squamish does. And one more item. This is a look ahead to Saturday. Squamish Helping Hands is holding a Coldest Night of the Year event. I'll be participating in that evening event, and I'm pretty sure that more than a few of us in this room will be there. A team fundraising page is set up to raise money for Helping Hands, And as a way of supporting the good work that the society does in our community, that option is there for anybody that wants to donate. So my various online accounts have links to the donation page set up by the District of Squamish team. So I encourage everyone to learn more about the event and consider making a contribution to support the Helping Hands Society in their mission. And if there's anybody that's hearing this that needs some help getting to that donation link, direct message me. I would be happy to point you in the direction.
Thank you, Councillor French. Any others? Councillor Anderson.
This past Saturday, members of staff and council took part in a fun session at the curling rink organized by our staff, and I think we all had a great time. Mayor Herford won the day. However, Councillor Pettingill made the best takeout shot of the day, and I'm glad he was on my team. But what I wanted to emphasize is what a great opportunity for us to be exposed, both staff and council members, and many of us for the first time, to a wonderful facility, volunteer run, that we have in the community. And it's nice for us all to take the opportunity to visit some of these locations around town for exposure and understanding how they work and how they do what they do for the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, and hopefully I won't steal too much of your thunder, but thinking back just to last week was a busy one. On Monday, we had Minister Dix in town, Health Minister. Mayor Herford was there for the announcement at Squamish General Hospital that there will be a CT scanner coming to our community in the coming year. This has been years of advocacy from our local physicians to get this important piece of diagnostic equipment, and it's going to be really life-changing for folks who need that service, as well as for our practitioners who are working here. It's been really difficult to try and employ folks without having some of this modern technology. It's expected that once it opens in 2025, they'll be able to do 7,000 CT scans a year. Last year alone, 5,500 patients had to leave Squamish just to get a CT scan. So the numbers really do speak for themselves, but really also appreciate VCH and the Hospital Foundation and then the Regional Hospital District for coming to the table and finding the money to both get the capital investment as well as from the VCH side, the operational component. It's going to be a modular add-on to the hospital so that any future planning that comes out of the long-term Healthy Sea to Sky vision process, it means that we can bring the CT scanner with us if the hospital moves or shifts or so that's a really exciting advancement for our community that I just wanted to highlight and thank Minister Dix for taking the time to come to Squamish for that announcement. And then on Tuesday and Wednesday, Mayor Herford and I were also at the UBCM Housing Summit, which was 2 days of trying to reckon with the implications of Bill 45, 46, and 47 that are coming down from the province all around housing. It was a really useful way to spend 2 days, one to understand how different communities are managing the deluge of downloading, and then also the opportunities that it's presenting. For me, it really highlighted a few things in terms of some of the communities that are actually quite far along, and there's folks like Kelowna and Victoria who are kind of like, this is stuff that we're already doing. We don't see it as being a huge impact, to also being a little bit eye-opening for me in terms of some of the implications around the short-term rentals regulation. So lots to bring back, and I'll find a way to try and download it in a more effective way than right now.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stoner. Other comments? It's been a busy 2 weeks. And as I was making notes for this, I couldn't believe it all happened in the last 2 weeks. So on the 7th, we had a youth council meeting, and youth council continues to work towards this year's Bears Den, and where they'll be giving away $10,000 to a worthy cause to advance matters that they deem important to youth in the community. So applications are still open for Bears Den. So if you haven't applied yet, it's February 29th is when the applications close, but the applications are live now. And Bears Den itself will happen on April 24th. As well, during that meeting, we also heard about the Cubs Den projects that the group has taken on some smaller projects to run, or programs to run themselves, and some were underway already. Like there was a games night that's already happened, and there's other initiatives coming. So have a look for Youth Council Cubs Den projects as they start to continue to roll out, and the big Bears Den event happening on April 24th. And we also heard from from the Youth Council that they wanted to be more in the driver's seat of what was happening. So this was the first meeting where the adults in the room stepped back and had the two youth step up and run the meeting, develop the agenda. We're there to help, and really, I'm really impressed with that group to be able to sort of take the ball and run with it. So lots of great things happening at Youth Council. On the 8th, up at CAPU, we had a ceremonial signing of the MOU with CAPU, and I know that that's something that we've discussed through this in advance of the signing. But I think it's worth highlighting that we will have the return of post-secondary education to our community in a new way, and I think I'm really excited about that. I'm actually skipping some things on the list, believe it or not, but Multicultural Day on the 10th was amazing. And what an amazing venue as well, being at Totem Hall, and just our hosts at the Nation are just ever so gracious, and just such a wide variety of folks were involved, both in sort of presenting, whether it's their performance or there was food, just information, and just everyone was very open and curious, and it was great to be able to spend the day with that group. And if you haven't been, and this is my first time, I haven't had free Saturdays. I haven't been available on Saturdays for maybe 20 years. So it was great to do that, and it is now a staple of my calendar. I'll be back. On the 12th was the CT scanner announcement with Minister Dix, and I think it's great to see the province coming with investment in healthcare in our community in such a meaningful way. There's the capital expense of putting this CT scanner in, but then what it unlocks for VCH as far as the commitment to operate it for the foreseeable future and to continue to deliver that service going forward is just, it is a substantial investment, and I think further solidifies our position as the regional facility for Sea to Sky. So I'm really happy to see that, and I'd like to recognize the Hospital Foundation and their years of advocacy, starting with Dr. Kindry's recommendation that this is a piece of equipment we needed many moons ago. So it's great to see that moving forward, and a recognition, I think, that Squamish is growing, and the provincial resources need to match our growth. And which leads me right into the 13th, 14th, which was the housing summit, and really interesting to hear many panels of both staff and elected officials tackling the various pieces of the new housing legislation, and what it means for them, or interpretations that they've found they could share. And so a lot of sharing happening there. and still a lot of unknowns. And I did have opportunity to meet Federal Housing Minister Sean Fraser, and I made sure to pass on our community's appreciation for the Housing Accelerator funds. And but it was great to see provincial, federal folks attending the event organized by municipal parties. So it's good to see start to feel the all government response to the housing crisis. And that was all in the last 2 weeks. So it's been a really busy time, but lots of really positive things happening. And I appreciate all the opportunities there. That's the end of my update. We have no motion to close, so I'm looking for a motion to terminate by Councillor Hamilton and seconded by Councillor Stoner. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously.